Welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much again for joining us. We had a fantastic first session. I think my major takeaway of which is that we are no longer in a work from home mode so much as at a live from work mode. I think ultimately at the end of the day, organizations shifting to become on demand is now a necessity more so than an option. And I think, apropos with the theme of our CIO Summit last year, which was our 7th annual in-person, this being our now first, perhaps in virtual CIO Summit, the reality is digital evolution has never been more important. For where we sit today, I think we all have to adapt. Normally, I would be able to be up on stage and in person, and we'd be doing this where I could be in the audience and kind of say, everybody, get together and get a chance to kind of scoot closer. I have a feeling even when we do our in-person one in July, which will actually be on July 23rd, and I hope you all can join us in person. I really hope that we can all get together in person by then. But I'll probably actually be talking about, hey, maybe you can scoot a little bit further away from each other just to make sure that everybody's safe. A couple of things just maybe at the outset. So obviously, thank you everyone from our panel last session. Thank you everyone for joining today as well. And I'd also like to thank and acknowledge our friends and partners who are making all of this possible from a sponsorship perspective, certainly Darktrace, Lightspeed Venture Partners, Spark Digital, and many of the others who certainly, when we all get back together in person, can participate as well. And of course, thank you all of our essential workers, our healthcare workers, our first responders, everybody who's making this country run, even still under these difficult times. I think if I look back 1 year and 7 days ago, I made a bit of an announcement, hey, digital transformation is dead. It was dead on arrival. The reality is it says, hey, when you have a digital project, you move from point A to point B, and that's it, you're done, mission accomplished. The reality is we need to embrace evolution, and digital evolution is a better reflection of exactly what we're going through right now. I think I also made the comment that you're going to see major Fortune 500 companies disappear over the course of the next 10 years. Little did I know it would be this fast and for this reason, but I think that's a wake-up call to us all, and I hope that we all take lessons from this as we continue to evolve and continue on our path of a digital evolution journey. We have a fantastic couple of sessions coming up next. So we have our second session, which will be focused on security. After that will be our third session, which is focused on really intelligence becoming a smart enterprise or a data-driven enterprise. We can talk more about that then. But in terms of security, I think there are a few fundamental concepts. And true to evolution, the attackers are evolving as well. I think times of chaos, times of certainly discord, and even times of change in general end up being opportunities for attackers. And so we're at a moment in time, especially as many security organizations and many CISOs actually have responsibility for things like disaster recovery and things like making sure that everybody's able to work from home and be that on-demand enterprise, that they still also have to make sure they invest in and continue to drive a protected enterprise strategy. So the session today, what we're going to be talking about is really the concept of achieving proactive security in a time of crisis. Ultimately, that's a big challenge, I think, even in a time of non-crisis, even in the best of kind of days. And so what are those practical tips and tricks? What are those things that people are doing within their organizations and their programs to make sure we stay ahead of the curve? And so I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists, and also I'd like to welcome David Shefter. David is our CISO here at Landmark, and he'll be moderating today's panel. So I'll tell everyone to give a virtual round of applause, and we can kind of jump in.
This esteemed panel of individuals that will be joining into the conversation. But let me just set the stage here just briefly. And the idea is just expanding a little bit on what Anthony said. And really, in a matter of 60 days, companies have moved from brick and mortar to actually extending their perimeter to literally 114 different countries. I think that's the number in the world. So in terms of that type of coverage and that type of enormous shift, obviously as part of the security umbrella, the perimeter has shifted dramatically. And not only that, you have to move quickly to respond to all these social distancing requirements, increased workforce mobility, and this full remote capability. So with no further ado, let me introduce my panelists here. We have Joe Leggio, who's the Chief Information Officer for National Veterinary Associates, Mike Cena, who's the Head of Cybersecurity for A&E Networks, and David Masson, who's the Director of Enterprise Security for Darktrace. All very accomplished individuals, really looking forward to this conversation. But let me throw a question out and just to start the conversation. actually, before that, Joe, Mike, David, maybe a brief introduction of yourselves, and then we can go into a couple questions.
Okay, so hello everyone.
Joe.
Yes, thanks David. Hello everyone, Joe Leggio here. I'm the CIO for the National Veterinary Associates. We are what's known as a consolidator in the pet care industry. So we purchase veterinary clinics and pet resorts and fold them into our community and run their businesses so that the practitioners can just focus on doing what they love, which is administering care and service to their pets and their pet parents via the clients. So we operate nearly 900 locations across the globe with a heavy concentration in North America, but also with ownership interests as well in Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. So welcome everybody, and looking forward to the session.
Mike, perhaps, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Michael Cena. I'm the head of cybersecurity for A&E Networks. So we're a global media company with a number of channels and sites underneath us, including the A&E brand, as well as a History Channel, Lifetime, FYI, and some others, as well as kind of like international channels too. So I manage all of the corporate B2B security policy standards throughout the company.
Terrific, thank you. David.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dave Masson. I'm the Director of Enterprise Cybersecurity at Darktrace.
Masson. I'm the Director of Enterprise Cybersecurity at Darktrace.
And we're the world leaders in using AI to find threat on networks and stopping it in seconds. We've been around since 2013. Amazing growth since then. We have offices all over the world. We have two headquarters, one in London, one in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, where we originally come from, and one in San Francisco. We have some of the best PhD mathematicians working on AI as the solution. And I'm really pleased to be here. Looking forward to the talk.
Great, thank you. So let me pose a question. Joe, I'll start with you. You know, currently today, no matter the size of your business with COVID-19, things have dramatically changed. At the same time, things remain constant. Security is still of the utmost priority. Phishing is still a significant way for the multiple attacks, the majority of attacks in the marketplace. Given this new threat environment, what keeps you up at night these days? Are there any new trends you're seeing from adversaries and attackers that you think are especially threatening?
Sure. Well, you know, a lot of things that keep me up at night. As you mentioned, and I think as Anthony covered in the overview, cyber criminals love to capitalize on current events. So this COVID crisis is certainly providing ample opportunity. You know, people are constantly looking for late breaking news, so it's really easy to fall victim to phishing, you know, that have links with malicious payloads in them. You know, where there are new varieties that are seeking to capitalize on this COVID crisis. As far as things on the rise, malware infections for sure. The use of internet tactics through malicious payloads that assemble and type encryption attacks. So, so that's something that we certainly are seeing as being on the rise. You know, as far as just one thing in the category keeping me up at night is, you know, someone hijacking a Zoom meeting amongst my top executives. So that definitely is keeping me up at night.
That's interesting. Thank you for that. I think that's been in a lot of the press lately. But Michael, maybe you can give us a little perspective as well, because obviously it's a different industry, especially with the control of IP and content and things like that you do have to worry about, and is a different concern.
Yeah, sure. So I think the attack vectors right now are really a lot of the things that Joe was talking about, right? So we're seeing like huge increases in the amount of phishing and kind of like email attacks that we get. It's not all credential phishing, right? Especially now there's so much COVID related themes. There's a lot of kind of like attachments, malicious attachments to emails, things like that. So, you know, we're really paying a lot of attention to ratcheting up all of our email controls and the monitoring solutions around that and how fast we respond to those things. As far as what you're talking about IP and those type of things, that's always a concern to us. But from the work from home kind of shift is, you know, something that we have to be especially you know, aware of and conscious of, right? Because when employees that typically don't work from home. In the technology department, people are very accustomed to it and they're used to it. But now we have like a huge number of employees that are used to coming into work every day, right? And now they're, trying to figure out how to work from home, maybe over a VPN, maybe through Citrix or some other means. So there's some practices that are changing now. So we need a lot of awareness to make sure that we're really driving the message home of this is how to work safely. These are safe practices and these are unsafe practices. So we don't have any kind of like inadvertent kind of like leaks or of IP or anything like that. So that's something I think that, that's not maybe unique to my industry. It's probably across the board for companies that are so used to having a large workforce in the office. Habits change. And then to Joe's point too, those habits, right, lead to, maybe opening that link, clicking that thing, because now it's, you lose some of that I'm at work, I'm in the office. It's kind of getting blended and mixed. So trying to make sure to keep everybody aware and informed and know what the latest threats are, all of those types of things are I think, of the utmost importance right now.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like how do you extend your culture into the home office?
Mm-hmm.
And the experience that you have in the workplace. David, let me ask you from, Darktrace perspective, you guys have untold billions of points of reference from a data perspective. What are you seeing in terms of new threat vectors and things like that as people move their perimeter into the home office from the corporate office?
Well, to be honest with you might as well forget using the word perimeter. It doesn't really exist anymore. The perimeter went the minute everybody left headquarters and headed off somewhere else. An absolute explosion in what you call the threat landscape because it just got so big. If you had 500 people at headquarters, the bad guys had one place to attack. Now they've got 501. It's also as Michael was saying, we've seen an explosion in very clever phishing attacks exploiting COVID-19 and also exploiting work from home. Obviously, that's related to COVID-19 as a way of fooling people into clicking on that link and looking at that attachment. If you thought your networks were complex and you struggled with visibility when everybody was in headquarters, it's now just got so much worse because everybody is spread, diffused, they're absolutely everywhere. They don't have the same security tools they did have when they were in the office. They're using the home router where the password for the router is probably, take a wild guess, password, if it's even got one. And don't forget, they might well be using VPNs, etc. But when they're trying out your SaaS products, you can't see that. You've just got to hope that they're safe and sound when they go into your SaaS product and it doesn't come back in that way. And just one final thing I'll say on this is if we come back to headquarters, stand by for a wave of threat and risk coming from home back into headquarters.
It's an interesting perspective that I had not thought of. Joe.
Yeah, just one additional point. Let's not rule out just the plain and simple, even phone scams. We have seen some examples, model, and our businesses are open because we're issuing essential care. So we've had some examples where we've had businesses receiving calls from people posing as government agencies, looking for PII information about potentially furloughed employees, right? So talk about trying to capitalize on something very, real and totally relatable to this specific crisis that we're having. So it doesn't have to be technology related in order to be effective. So you just have to make sure that you're protecting on all cylinders, across every different potential threat landscape.
Yeah, I mean, a phone isn't a phone anymore, right? It's more powerful than a computer was 10 years ago by far.
That's right.
We've also seen texts. We've also seen a lot of texts to people's phones, business phones, personal phones, and they report a lot to us. And some phishing through text messaging. Because I think that attackers realize that our modes of communication with each other are not just kind of like our corporate, Slack or Teams or whatever the messaging is, or email. Right now we're calling, we're texting. There's all kind of ways of communication just to adapt to the new normal. So I think that all of those types of things where an employee might feel more comfortable and kind of feel removed from the typical kind of corporate restrictions are all the most likely attack vectors.
I think that's a really good point as well. I mean, and obviously the National Blocking Registry doesn't cover all the phones. I think we're all going through that 10 times a day. We're probably trying to block cell phone numbers that are coming in invalid. So interesting enough, and this all revolves around the work from home type of idea. So this is a question about corporate responsibility. As we move remotely and we move into the home office, what is the responsibility of the corporation to protect the home? So for example, how does the corporation protect the home from the network perspective, software perspective? And is it the responsibility of the home to at least provide recommendations and guidance to individuals on how to protect their home? So there's that back and forth there as you shift, the workplace, and workers are now working in scenarios where a lot of us don't have offices, or we're sitting on couches, and most of us have high-speed internet. How do you actually protect that infrastructure? Because a VPN only goes so far because of all the outward network capabilities and access that someone has from their home office. So
that comes to identity.
No, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of that comes to identity, right? So similar to what David was saying earlier, the idea of the perimeter being network boundaries and firewalls, I think that they have their place, certainly around our production infrastructures, production applications, things that we host. But from employee A having access to these 5 SaaS apps, and employee B having access to these 4 SaaS apps and these 3 apps that are on-prem. So maybe they need a VPN and employee A doesn't need a VPN. I think that identity management is really a key there, and putting a lot of controls around authorization, authentication, multi-factor authentication, suspicious activities, geographically improbable or impossible logins, things like that, to really kind of figure out is user A actually user A, or is it an attacker that's taking control or doing some session hijacking or somehow getting in the way, right? So I think that it more than ever now, we need to have such a focus on identity management, identity systems, privileged access, and those type of things. And I think that that's just going to keep on continuing even after we go back to work, because that's just the way that work is shifting, right, towards SaaS, toward being connected anywhere from any device.
On that same topic, do you have a stand from an A&E perspective in terms of providing equipment to individuals, or do they actually use their home? Because there's a little bit of a discrepancy there in terms of the implementation of security. Do you get concerned with PII as part of this when someone starts using their personal devices?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Joe and David might have a little bit different perspective, but we have different policies for different groups, different people. In general, we prefer, obviously, that you use corporate equipment. But with that being said, if somebody has Ping or Okta or any one of these SSO vendors, and they're able to connect to Salesforce or whatever SaaS app they use, it's kind of hard to put policies in place to say, well, you can only connect to that from like a corporate laptop or a corporate system. It's in some points, I think that maybe we're even trying to doing work that might not even be valuable, right? So I think that in those cases, it comes down to like, what can they access, what can be downloaded, how can things be shared, and putting a lot of those controls in place, rather than this is the only equipment that you're allowed to use. I think when it comes to sensitive things, editing our shows, for instance, then
sure,
only you need our corporate equipment and technology and VPN. For VPNs, obviously, like, we're not going to give people permission to use a VPN on a non-corporate machine. But for the SaaS aspect of things, it's all about identity.
Cool. Thank you for that. David, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, I think companies do have some remit here to give good advice to their employees, but not just around cybersecurity and good cyber hygiene. One of the reasons people are clicking on these links at this time when these emails come in is because the bad guys are exploiting fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and people want information about the real virus and computer viruses. And one thing that a lot of companies could do is just updating their websites and saying to their employees, look, don't wait for somebody to send you information about something. Come to our website and read it there. If we've got something to say about cybersecurity, we'll say it there. Don't click on something because somebody's saying, hey, do you want to know about how to configure your firewall? It's not your firewall, sorry, your VPN. Here's the latest on COVID-19. Don't tell them. No, come to us for that information. Come to that for the network information. Come to us for how to use multi-factor authentication and the likes. coming back to another point that was just made here about working from home, obviously I'm going to take a wild guess that most of us here, we're all at home with our families. But for a lot of our young employees, they're sharing accommodation with other people. And they really actually need to really look after the iPhones and Android phones and the computer laptop, because it's not at headquarters anymore. It's in a building where maybe they're sharing with other people. And they've got to be careful how they use them, where they leave them lying around. Some of it's as basic as that.
That's great. Thank you. Joe, I'm with, you have tens of hundreds of locations globally and internationally that you have to deal with. What are you seeing in terms of the landscape that you have to deal with? Is there specific, if you will, country concerns that have to be taken into effect for work from home? Protection of individuals' rights within those countries. There's a lot of dynamics around that have to factor in, I think, in your equation.
We're not necessarily seeing challenges in that area, but as far as where the responsibilities lie as far as protecting homes, certainly a challenging question. I would say, at a minimum, we're there to provide recommendations, totality of community of workers, but most of those are our veterinary staff, as well as our pet resort staff that are actually in the physical locations, the physical stores. We have probably about 800 or so support center resources, and those are by and large, the majority of our folks that are actually working from home. And in those cases, a large percentage of that team are field staff that already are mobile because they travel a lot, so they have company issued laptops. So less of a concern about using home equipment. And even what we did before we disbanded our folks in our corporate office in LA, we have quite a few administrative and clerical staff that have small footprint desktop machines. So we feel that we don't really have a high percentage of people actually using home equipment. So that actually is one way that we're making it a little bit safer.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. What I'd like to do is, before asking you guys another question here, just for the audience and people that have joined us in general, if you have questions, please put them into the interface, and we will bring them to the group of esteemed speakers that we have on our panel. In the meantime, just a general question here. What advice would you give IT and security teams that are already stretched thin? How do businesses support these teams, things like that?
Sure.
So it's, these obviously resources have become stressed because of COVID-19. How do you recommend, how do they optimize? How do they, manage their daily routine? How do they make things more or less be business as usual as much as humanly possible?
I think the word that you used is really important there, which is routine. I think that it's very easy to get out of a routine. And I think that also, there's a lot of potential for overwork, right? Because when your work and your home is the same place all day, in your living room, in your kitchen, wherever it might be, there's a lot of lines that get blurred, and then people tend to, I think, overwork, and then maybe they get burnt out, and then they're not actually as effective during the day. So I think that that's something to be cautious of. But as far as a small security team already stretched thin, which is probably majority of security teams, I think that now is, it's absolutely critical to have a lot of partnerships throughout the company. So partnerships with the internal, service desk teams, tech ops teams, network support teams, all of the engineering teams, to make sure that, everybody's in alignment with, who can help out where and when. And then I think the next bit about that is automation and orchestration. I think there's no better time than now to kind of leverage any capabilities. And there's, so many vendors that are in the space right now. They're really trying to do the right thing, right? So we're in a time right now where we're really seeing kind of I feel like the best side of humanity in a lot of places, where kind of some companies are kind of putting profits to the side temporarily to just help out as much as they can. So I think that some recommendation I would have is, make sure that you're reaching out to all your vendors, getting whatever professional services or help that you can now to implement any type of automation, system tuning, make sure that those alerts are going down, that the events are going down, that everything is kind of, you have all of your health checks in place, because a lot of the vendors, are really being proactive and offering that level of help right now. So I think that it's a combination between, having like those liaisons in the different departments, making sure that, the security team is looking to be very, very helpful and have those partnerships, and then adding the automation and leveraging any additional support that they can get externally that might be available to them.
Actually, an extension to that, because I think you made some really, really good points. We did have a question that came in. In your opinion, where are the opportunities for security teams to take advantage of this crisis to do things differently for proactive security? Joe, David, start with one of you guys here. Go ahead, David.
I know I would say this because I'm the AI company. It's hard to get good qualified staff before this crisis broke out. I've always been saying you can't throw more people at the cyber problem. And really now is the time for people to start considering letting machines start to take up some of the heavy lift. Really, whether it's visibility, whether it's complexity, whether it's just dealing with speed. And I keep repeating this. This isn't about AI replacing people. Okay, Skynet's not going to happen, folks. This is quite simply a tool. It's a tool to actually help hard-pressed security teams, and it really does help them, and freeing them up so they can actually concentrate on some quality work, and maybe some quality work around the sudden digital transformation, which ironically has been driven by a real virus.
Interesting. Joe, any thoughts on that matter?
Yeah, I would just say that the key really is, prioritization, because let's face it, we all had heavy workloads before any of this started. And the fact that this is now thrust upon us, I mean, our companies are relying on us to help keep the businesses moving. So, at a minimum, the volume of work is only getting larger, at least for our businesses as an example, curbside, pickup and drop off, as far as, bringing your pet into a veterinary clinic has become the norm, because we don't want people worried about, coming into the building. So even, that's created new work for my team, as far as, so now we have to figure out a way in order for that, the payment transaction to actually shift outside the stores as well, and doing that in a manner that could be done securely, right? So, so the work was already probably more than we can handle. So I think the key is, prioritize the work and really align the activities to the critical business processes to ensure that organizations and the security organizations, are continuing to add the most value. So that's the thing that we've been doing. We're stretched thin as well. We've prioritized our work. We've put projects on hold. So don't be afraid to do that. I think you'll be applauded for that, as opposed to just trying to be the hero and just take on more work. If you've got a good way to prioritize and, new volumes of work, even telemedicine has become a really important tactic in our industry. So, figuring out ways to enable that so our veterinarians could actually administer care, even if the pets aren't coming directly to our sites. That's creating, completely new work that we didn't have to deal with, 2 months ago. So it's really, to me, mostly about priority.
Yeah, so in general, I mean, you're not planning on doing any slowdown or stoppage from a security perspective. If anything, it's expanded to focus. I mean, the business has to run, but the security is not stopping anytime soon or slow.
That's right. Absolutely not. But we have to actually, it's creating new projects, if you will, that weren't even ideated before any of this started. And the credit card payments was a great example of that.
Let me ask one final question here. Obviously isolation is difficult for everyone, but there's a lot of silver linings out there. What's one good thing you've done with you or yourself, your family, during this time that's been a bright spot, fun activity? For example, I know a person that's done camping and s'mores and ghost stories in their backyard. I myself have set up sheets on the deck and used a projector to actually broadcast movies for my kids with s'mores as well. So that's just been one thing that I've done. It would be great to get your input and your thoughts and what you've experienced as well. David, why don't we start with you?
Okay, as a family, we've been a bit dispersed over the last few years. Me with traveling, although that's all come to a halt. My son being at university in another country and various other things. So for the first time in a long time, we've all been together every day for now 2 months. And we've set up we play a game every evening. It's a pretty childish game, but we've got a league going. And it's called It's called the Monkey Race. It's actually a board game that came out in 1972, but it's going down a treat here, I can tell you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Joe or Mike?
Well, so I can tell you, one of the things for me is actually my family is actually dispersed all around America. Right, I have family in Colorado, Florida. I live in New York, and typically like we would have like a phone call now and again, and we travel around to visit each other. But we just had kind of like Easter holiday and things like that have gone by. So we've actually taken to having kind of family dinners over Zoom. Right. So this kind of like idea that kind of, our whole family is getting together, even from all different parts of the country. That's something that we didn't do before, even though it was like available. Like Zoom has always been around, Teams, Ring Central, whatever the case may be. But now it's such an accepted norm that it's kind of like propelled us to kind of like be more social, even while we're remote. I think that's something positive that came out of this.
I think that's great. Joe?
Yeah, we've cooking. Obviously, how often does Cinco de Mayo fall on a Taco Tuesday? So, we made sure that we took advantage of that, and the tequila was flowing. We were cooking, together as a family, but then also just recreationally, some board games and playing cards just to pass the time. And as I'm here in New York, but most of my company's activities on the West Coast, I'm pretty much working a little bit of East Coast time, a lot of West Coast time, so my day ends quite late. But just getting in a little bit of TV time with the family as well.
That's great. Well, listen, thank you, panel. You've been great. Thank you to everyone who has joined our security session, and thank you to all our partners who have made today possible. We very much look forward to seeing you later today for our third and final session, which is entitled Leveraging Intelligence for the Smarter Enterprise. That will be at 4 p.m. Eastern. Once again, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, David. Take care, everybody.